So I hear some discussion out there. Are there other questions? Yes.
Okay, so in our setting, what we've done in the past is we've always have principal leadership have always chosen that's
Okay.
what they're planning to go to.
Okay.
But one of my private schools have done is if the kids are on Carson Smith, they have always provided someone to do for them.
Uh-huh.
If they're not on Carson Smith and are not accepting scholarships, then we've been providing that service. That's still okay to do.
That's okay to do. However, they have the right to go to the district office and say, we'd like speech if there's money available. We need services, and if they want speech services, there's money available, you could still provide that service to them. So the students have that right to.
What we're providing.
Well, that's what we're clarifying that Carson Smith students are still eligible to receive those services from the public school. Yes, and that came directly from the Federal Office of Special Education. That's correct. Does that make it a little more clear? And not to make excuses, but I started here in January. I'm from outside the education system. I'm an auditor by trade. I audited unemployment. Carson is to provide a scholarship to receive education services in a private school setting. It's a form of a parent choice voucher. It's basically what it is. And the private schools are not required to provide those same services that a public school would provide. In fact, there are some schools that don't provide all the services that they maybe would get normally in a public setting. Correct.
So parents have made a unilateral decision to be private school. You didn't get to weigh in and say, oh, you may not want to do that.
Correct.
And I understand the proportionate share. We do consultation, we do monthly meetings, we provided equipment to cover our proportionate share. But a few years ago, we were providing service. I'm looking for my public school grant. We were providing service, but then a letter came out that was pretty clear that if parents chose to take the scholarship, and all of them do, we haven't had one that has said, no, we won't take the money.
Yeah.
And they have an item wait. They have to sign it off that they vote not to go to the other.
So this is saying that they're not eligible to receive.
Special education services.
Oh, this is saying they're not eligible to receive a free, appropriate public education. Meaning they're not allowed to attend your classroom and receive Carson at the same time. All this private proportionate share or equitable services, as known in the federal documents, is stating is that they're eligible to receive related services at your school up to the dollar amount that you're required to expend. So if your school is required to spend $5,000 and you spent that $5,000 and a Carson Smith student comes to you and say, hey, I want equitable services, you're not required to expend the additional monies. It's a mathematical formula. The school. The public school consults with the private school to determine what is reasonable and feasible to provide.
So on the form, then, if a parent is looking at those two options, I will take the scholarship and they put that in, and the application makes it so at that point they're saying they will not then, because we were told they could not access anything from public schools. Does that mean it's not valid what they're doing, or should that not be on there? Up to this point.
Yeah, but I think it's the difference between what's proportionate. My concern is how we determine that proportionate share. Is it based on the numbers of students that, and I'm sure the directors will get,
It's
go back and have my director.
based on the number of students in your consulting schools within your district boundaries.
Right, yeah. But, yeah, so.
On all the students within your district boundaries. So if your district has 5 private schools that you're participating with, the sum of all those students in those private schools is what would go into your private proportionate share calculation.
When that proportionate share is up, you say lower services?
That's what you have the ability to say that. You're not required to provide services in excess of that amount.
So do we, do they can't provide transportation to come to public schools for that?
Yes.
You don't have to send over there.
You don't have to send a teacher over, no. You have the ability to determine how you're going to provide the services. They don't have a right that you come to their home or they come to private school, but that's in consultation with the private school.
So if we say they can come to public school for that service, the parents provide that transportation?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Moving on into the application. We changed the application slightly. The application changed to add a second parent to the form. So as a parent, again, you can have 2 parents on the form, and there's also a place for the signature of both parents right here. This is to avoid the confusion we have with the checks being signed, having to be signed by which parent signed the application, make sure that it matches up. It's also in our audit findings. So we eliminated that problem. Also, because the legislature this year, yes?
Are you required to have 2 parents?
No.
No, you're not required to have 2 parents sign it.
Okay. And if 2 parents do sign it, will the checks come out or will they say and?
It will say or.
It will say or.
Yes. I'll make sure of that.
Because the and is a deal breaker.
No, I know. As an auditor, I realize that how that works there.
Can we change past applications to include both?
If you get signatures, yes.
If there's a
application?
Yes.
change form that you can, or an add guardian or parent form that's online that they can fill out and sign.
I'm not inclined as administrator to send out 1,000 letters. But if each school wants to go ahead and update that process, they're more than welcome to do that. Also, this past year, the legislature authorized additional funding for preschool students. Preschool students who are full-day students who have not who are still enrolled as of the 4th quarter. Actually, I take that back. Who have been enrolled in any quarters are eligible for a supplemental lottery. So as long as there's funding in our system, we will pay a preschool student that is full day up to the same amount that a full-day kindergartner would receive. And this past year, we actually sent out about a month ago, 60 checks, supplemental checks. And we usually do that in between May and July. This year it got done June 30th. For that reason, we're going to have to indicate a full day or half day for kindergartners and for preschoolers. So we know who should get the checks. This past year, when we did this process, we had to have Amy call each school and verify which students were full-day preschoolers and which ones were not. So for all new applications, we're going to have this indicated. If there's funding in preschool, yeah.
If there's funding available at the end of the year, then additional funds.
Yes. This year there was some funds because I projected we'd have more students enrolling in the 3rd and 4th quarters than we actually did, and a few more dropped out. So the supplemental funding I requested during the legislature actually was used to pay the preschoolers this year. Let's see here. We have an ATMR here. We made some changes to the ATMR. We added additional lines for people to participate in the ATMR in this meeting. So we're going to mimic from now on the IEP process, where we have at least a LE representative, a person from special education is there. Also, we have the parent there. We have a private school representative there. You want to have an individual who can interpret the assessment results. A lot of schools, that's probably a psychologist in the LEA. and also another representative such as related services person. So if they're going to get speech or OT or PT, or they have a reading specialist or what have you, that person will be there to participate in the meeting also. Not required if not receiving related services, but if they are receiving related services, they will be required. And we'll address the reasoning for this later on, but it's because of the audit findings that we are going to mimic the IEP process, actually mirror it. And this is in the state special education rules. Sure.
In the past, we've always had one of us be the sped teacher, we have to work with one of us sped teacher, one of us has been a jury representative. And we had our related service or our school life involved as well. But do we need to always have one of our LEAs plus our special ed teacher? Or can that district representative be the LEA?
If the person from district is can fill both roles of a representative and a special education qualified individual. What we want to make sure of is that the LEA representative is someone who can bind the LEA to provide services.
Because I'm both.
Okay.
And before I would have one of my sped teachers come with me and take turns playing different roles. But if it just takes one of us to do both roles, that saves time.
Yeah, that would work, but you couldn't have, say, a principal who's not a specially qualified individual or certified individual to fulfill.
Someone from our special ed department.
Okay, that should work.
Okay. And what about for the private school staff? Many times, the forum has always said that the private schools, like Paperwork, has always said it's the private school's responsibility to initiate and convene the ATMR. So there will be an administrator, but there won't be a classroom teacher. What do we do about that? Because we don't have any control over private.
So the private school, it's up to them to who they want to send and provide and coordinate that information. If it be their director or if it be the teachers that a student may be under. But who the private school provides to be at this meeting is...
So they can just send one person.
They can.
So if speech therapist that we have signed works as a speech therapist, we never be able to get on.
So who do you, the question that is...
So the question is, how can all of our so could the person who is going to represent special ed have the umbrella to represent her as well for speech?
So my question is, how do you conduct your IEP meetings when speech is involved for a student in your public system?
Well, they're in the same building, so they make time in their schedule to do that. To have somebody drive from a public school all the way to one of these private schools, that's something that
So,
districts paying them to be a student.
so is it possible to have the ATMR meeting conducted at the district office? And have the private school individual and the parents come to the district office?
But the private school probably doesn't really like that,
I
right?
don't think.
They can only hear you, so they're not hearing, so you need to clarify the questions that are being asked, so they're only hearing you.
All right. So
No, I just wondered if we spend the time with the speech therapist to get all the appropriate information and have a good understanding of the material we're presenting, which is what we've been doing. We're pretty clear on it. And then we also have the speech therapist call if the parent has any questions to that phone conversation. Or I tell the parents that they can go to her public school after school and meet with her if they have more questions. I feel like we've pretty well covered it. Would that be good enough for her to sign?
I would be hesitant to say yes, just because the directive that we've come as a department is that we want to mimic the IEP process directly. And so if you have another person in there who is knowledgeable enough to speak to the assessment results and answer parent questions about the related services that would be given, like say a school psychologist or someone else of that capacity that has the credentials and that has the knowledge to be able to answer questions, explain the reasons of why, I think that would suffice. But absent that, I would say that you would have to have a speech person in there with them.
It can't be in the phone.
They're gonna have to. They could, but they're gonna have to be able to sign the form eventually. That they attest to that.
So can you state what we've been discussing into the microphone so everybody else can hear?
So for those online, the question was regarding who has to be at these IEP meetings. And the answer is that we have to have individuals there that first can bind the district to a decision, that B, are special education qualified, and that C, can interpret the results. Now those can be different people altogether, or they can be same person or multiple people who can qualify more than one category. So if you have a special director who also is qualified to interpret assessment results and can speak to any related services that are being provided, that would suffice for those requirements. Absent someone of that nature, you would have to have different individuals to fulfill each role. You have any other questions? Are you administering the testing for the reevaluation or initial evaluation? You know, I would say generally these individuals that are providing the assessment of the testing, I would assume they had some sort of credentials in public school previously and maybe have other credentials also to allow them to still do it. That would suffice.
I have a question here from Lindsay Waldrop. What about a BCBA?
The BCBA could speak to behavior, or do require, you know, the parts of it that he or she needs behavior assistance or specialized instruction for behavior issues that qualify for the IEP. However, if it's not behavior related, it's other related services, you need to have he or she, if she is qualified in the areas of speech or occupational therapy, physical or PT, would be able to qualify that same role.
Is it okay if the services are behavioral?
Yes, that's correct. Any other questions so we can move on? And all these forms are available on our website in the same places. We have not moved them. We change them from time to time, but they have not been moved. And the new ATMR is not quite published yet. We're working on with some accessibility issues to make sure it's accessible for being ADA compliant, but it should be on there within this week. Well, this is an infographic of the Carson Smith process. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, but just to review, the parent should always submit the application with the first three parts filled out to the LEA. And then whether or not the student has an IEP determines where it goes from there. If they have an IEP and it has not expired, then the district office can send in the ATMR. And the change that's going to happen here is that they're going to send in the IEP also. We need to verify when an IEP expires. So if an IEP is submitted today and it was issued last January and that means it has an expiration date of 3 years from last January, we need to verify that information is correct. The reason is that we had an audit and we had quite a few documents reviewed that were expired, but we hadn't verified the actual date of when they expired. And technically a student was receiving funds past his eligibility date. Yes?
So you just made two statements. One about eligibility, which is previous, and then the yearly IEP. So which do you want?
So for the IEP, there's a yearly IEP and then there's an IEP evaluation that has to happen at least once every 3 years.
Right, that's eligibility determination.
Yes, that's what we're concerned about.
Okay, so you want the eligibility determination.
Correct.
Not the IEP.
That's correct.
Right.
Well, let me clarify. We probably need both because the eligibility determination, I assume, probably will not have the minutes of service needed.
Correct.
So we would need both of those forms.
Okay.
Well, it's just still from back what we were talking about with Kelly Eisenhart, who's from Alpine. How will someone qualify under SLD when the state moves to RTL? RTI.
We will follow the state guidelines. So whatever the state guidelines are published in the Special Education Rules Manual is what we will follow. That will determine eligibility, the process for determining eligibility, and so forth.
In the past, when done eligibility with eval, if they are in Carson Smith, the public school hadn't written an IEP.
Correct.
But if they weren't getting Carson Smith, they provided direct services, did write the IEP. So actually, who is responsible if they're on Carson Smith or not on Carson Smith? Who writes the IEP? Is it the public school or should it be
So
the school?
an IEP is only when the existing prior to enrollment in Carson Smith. When they come up for reevaluation, you will fill out the ETMR and submit that.
Right, and I know that, but who writes the yearly IEP? Is it the public school or?
You don't need to write a yearly IEP. You just need it.
The service plan, who writes that?
We don't need one for every year. We just need one at reevaluation. So we have one for initial evaluation and one for reevaluation 3 years later.
But if the public school is providing services to that student,
We do it yearly.
then the
Yeah.
public school is responsible to write the service plan.
Yes, that's correct.
But that wouldn't be, but what he's talking about is only for initial application.
And redeterminations.
And, right.
Yes.
On the ATM form, it says evaluation phase. IEP, the IEP, it says when the evaluation is done. On the ATMR, just like on an IEP, it says what is the next evaluation? 3 years from the last evaluation. So that's still on the form. You look at it. Evaluation date, you look on the IEP, go on some of the evaluation. On the IEP, it says what is the next reevaluation.
I know the evaluation is.
If they don't have an IEP, we do an evaluation. Then when our team decides, at the ATMR meeting, we make the final decision. The board requires special education. That's the end of the evaluation date. Years later.
That's correct. But the key is to provide us with the IEP evaluation form. We need to verify that it is correct. We've had instances found by our auditor that it was incorrect. So that's the recommendation, that we receive that information to verify that it is correct.
I don't know what the state has done out there.
That they need to provide the initial IEP evaluation form and the IEP form to certify the minutes of service. And for you concerned about the PowerPoint, Amy emailed a copy of the PowerPoint and the associated forms already, so you guys will have a copy of this.
Yeah. It's already been sent.
Do we have any other questions about this portion of it? Okay. Well, it's just another infographic about where the form goes to. So if they're already enrolled in a public school, then it goes to the district office where the child is enrolled. If they're not, we ask, do they have an IEP? If they already have an IEP, then it goes to the district office or charter office where the IEP is held. If not, it goes to the special education office of the district for where the private school is located.
Been getting a lot of applications in this year that are coming directly to me instead of going to the LEA first. It's very hard.
I'm sure it's no fault of you guys in this room, but if a parent asks what to do, inform them, bring it to the district office first, and then provide it to us. We're working on, I'm working on putting in protocols to have increased communication with the parents, with the LEAs, with the private schools. So we will start notifying the private schools. By a show of hands, would the private schools that are here prefer that we notify them at application or when they're approved? Application? Okay. We will start doing that. Yes.
I have a question on where parents should take the application. So if they live in Canyon, but they go to a Granite district and they have an IEP in Canyon, they can send the application to Canyon. Is that still the process?
Yes.
Is that clarified on the form? Because that's
You write that down.
What's that?
About, I clarify where it goes. It may not be clarified in our online publication, but we will make that clear.
we had some students, we had some students come from out of state, but did send a valid IEP with the application. So does that mean our director, I'm assuming our director can sign off that they have a valid IEP and we don't really need to meet with
That's correct.
Intermountain Christian or...
Treat it as with any other IEP as long as it's valid and has not expired.
But still, if it's a new IEP or a current IEP from Canyons or Davis or whatever, that's where the parent...
Yes, wherever the IEP is located.
So you're saying rather than boundary of school, we have students paying for going out of district. Private school is in, so they do the assessment that.
Depends on if they have an IEP.
Within that 1 year?
3 years.
Okay.
So
They come and they're under school here and we're in
that
back to their home.
wherever the district that wrote that IEP came from.
Right.
Yes.
So you're saying that in the past, when we've gotten an IEP, if it's valid, we put down the date the evaluation was done, put down 3 years when the evaluation done, have another evaluation. You're saying every year you want a new IEP written by a district that isn't Sherman that gets it.
No. Only if they're receiving services in your district would you write a new IEP every year. If they're not receiving services, they only need to have that done once every 3 years.
It's just at the point of application, if they have an IEP, we're going to go to the district where that IEP is held for that initial application. But then when the re-eval is due, it will be up to the district that they're in and the private school to do the re-eval.
So can I clarify?
Yes.
So if I have a student at Autism Solutions, which is one of my private schools, and I get applications in my box with an IEP, saying, Connie, do this, take care of it. I send it back to the school that wrote the IEP.
That's correct. Yes.
Is the portion of that initial application where we just sign that they have an IEP, I think it's section C.
That has not changed.
That will still be there. So we
Yeah.
don't do an ATMR, we just sign that.
Correct.
Correct.
And put in the SSID.
So the only change here really is that when you have that situation, that you send us the IEP.
Yes, okay.
Previously, they had requested not to send it, but because of the findings of the audit, they were requesting that it be sent to us.
So the IEP and the eligibility.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes. Any other questions? I don't want to move past any topics that people have questions still on.
Oh, can you please have no repeat spoken questions?
Okay, we'll work on that one. This is more about the ATMR. Do you fill that completely? Don't send us any forms that have sections missing knowingly. I understand mistakes happen, but...
Don't come, minutes aren't marked. Whatever the signature.
Yeah, yes. So, I reiterate, it has to be mailed or fax. It's the only secure methods we have at this moment to be able to, yeah.
Sorry, it says the whole IEP or just the service page?
It needs to be the evaluation page and the service page. As a reminder, the public school and the private school both need to keep a copy of the ATMR. That's actually written into our rule here. So when we come and do file reviews, for at least a 3-year period that they are eligible. Requested from the parents. If they have an IEP, the parents should have a copy of it. Requested the parents provide you a copy as a condition of enrollment.
I have a copy about the file. And we've done it 2 ways. Sometimes the public school has kept like the full big special ed file, and we want to give the private school copies. But now we flip-flop that because we have so many parents request files from private schools. Who should keep the big original special ed file, and who gets a copy
The public school should keep a copy of that, of the special ed file. That way you're in compliance with child fine regulations. As a public school, you're subject to that. The private schools aren't subject to child fine, unfortunately.
Okay.
So the burden is on the public school to keep copies of those.
We should keep the original. We should keep the original.
Yeah.
Okay, so
And
that
get
was
copies
different
for the
last
private
year.
school.
Okay.
There are files when we need them, and we do the reevaluation.
Yes.
So repeat that now. What?
The question was, what files should be kept by which entity? So the public entity should keep the original copies of the special ed file for all the assessment results, evaluations, all information that went into the set to determine eligibility. The private school needs to have a copy of the IEP or ETMR on file. And we ensure compliance with that during my site reviews I do every year. Moving on, they're done every 3 years. Generally, we try and advise the schools, the parents, and the public LEA when these are coming due, so it's not a surprise. And they must be submitted with every application, even if they're found to be ineligible for services. So if someone applies for the program, goes through their testing, and they're found ineligible, that means not meeting the requirements of the disability categories outlined in code, we still need that information so we can make a determination. Otherwise, it's just an incomplete application that's sitting out there in pending status without the official determination. So then we have an auditor that comes, reviews our files, and says, well, what happened with this person? What have you done with it? For our internal audit review. So we need to be able to say we completed the whole process. Yes?
You're trying to mirror special education. And the 3-year evaluation is we're able to hold a team meeting with the parents, teachers, and the LEA and determine if there's sufficient data to continue that classification or whether we were going to do that accurate.
That is.
So the private school, is it their responsibility to give us data to know how these kids are doing? Because a lot of times we're not giving any
I would say yes.
data.
I would say if I were working in a public setting, I wouldn't be signing an ETMR reevaluation if I didn't have sufficient data from the private school on the performance of the students.
We go in and actively. It's worth the time.
Right, but I understand it's hard for you to get that sometimes from the private school, but yeah, private school needs to give you guys some.
It's so hard in private school realizes that it's not going to be an ATMR before we're doing it in Carson.
What data are you looking for besides progress monitoring, the yearly goals? What other data are you looking? That's it? But not
The
report,
stuff that you always give us.
but not report card?
No, we do
Oh, that,
we have that. You give us report cards.
report card.
Any data that you would be using, that we look at to see if they're still moving eligibility.
We just need to know that the student still would be eligible for special education.
So anything that goes to their special need. If you have a child who has needs for behavior, I assume that we should provide some behavior reports or classroom observations, how they're interacting, anything that goes to determination of why they need special services and how they're doing.
Data that we collect, throughout that 3-year period.
Correct.
Right.
Group test, we got report, we got out.
SATs, APT.
But a recommendation I would make is you should look at a form that documents that 3-year reevaluation. We do it with special ed, the form they fill out, and talks about what maybe we look at.
What we use, we have to have that for Carson Smith, that private school.
Yes, I understand what you mean.
Down in our disclosure.
Hey, Amy, you write that down.
Which one, I'm sorry.
Add additional information to ATMR form. Sources of evaluation. Yes,
I just really quickly go back to the signatures on the HMR form.
sure.
If we are recommending that a student be discontinued from Carson Smith, do we still need all 6 of those signatures?
If the parent contests it, I would say yes. The parent is okay with it, understands, hey, my child that was in speech, he needed 30 minutes a day,
Right.
and now he's at grade level and want necessary, but they're contesting it and want to still remain in the program. It's tricky because being a non-public program, it's murky of what entitlements the parents still have. If it were a public school, they would be entitled to an appeal process and dispute resolution and all those facts there. But to be on the safe side, because then a parent can appeal the state board a determination for Carson Smith, and they can, in likelihood, if that was the case, the state board may order a full evaluation with all these people anyways. So if the parent's not disputing it, I would say no. But if they are disputing it, I would go through the process.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, when you just said have more information on the ATMR, we're already documenting that information on our eligibility determination.
Uh-huh.
So to write it onto the ATMR.
Well, maybe this, yeah, I understand that, but maybe we're going to look at internally and meet with our compliance specialists and with also with Leah, see what information, if it would be helpful to have, like a source of what type of information we use in the reevaluation, whether it's observations, whether it's test data, or what have you.
We're sending you a copy of the eligibility determination. That's all on there. So making us write it again on the assessment team meeting record is really a waste of our time.
Okay, I'll take that into consideration. Yeah.
That's my opinion.
No, I understand.
Leave that so-
Just write that down.
A student, our district we can access students that have an IEP, but the student that has had testing done through the Carson Smith and a determination made on their eligibility. We can't get a copy of the eligibility form. We can't access both of them. You have to have the student's name for that eligibility. We try to put our own form.
And we have put our students onto both, so we have access to that. So I think each district has to make a determination about how they document that. The ones that we have personally evaluated.
Any other questions here with this, of the form and the ATMRs? Okay. So this link on this page will have a link to the new form. Hopefully by the end of the week it'll be updated there. So still going over ATMR information, you have to use that form if you don't have an IEP. It must be completed by the LDA with all the signatures required in place. We already reviewed the remaining information here. Eligibility, yes?
When we're doing the assessment, we use the state guidelines. If it's autism, we need adaptive behavior, intellectual assessment, rating scale, the whole works. So we use the black guidelines.
Sure. And that should be the case everywhere, that if LEA who's making an assessment, either IEP or initial assessment for ATMR, should be following the state guidelines, because that goes back to child find. Generally, yes. being new to the program, I'm not sure what the practice is at all the private schools and all the LEAs, but I was, because they take that application to the LEA, the assessment would be done there, absent an existing IEP.
The LEA's charge.
So LEA should use state guidelines when determining.
Eligibility.
We sometimes have our own therapists, if they're accepted to our school, and we find they have a clinic, so they don't have an IEP, then the therapist will administer OWL or TEL.
Okay.
So would that be considered the evaluation is required? In the LEA do it, we did it. We got a qualified person did it, and we would do it with the LEA. Is that okay?
If there's assessment results to back it up, yes. And if if the consultation is made with the LEA's representatives and the parent, that this isn't agreed upon. The key here is that they meet the eligibility requirements, and that a decision made in this, this is essentially an IEP team of how many minutes are reasonable for the student to receive or need to receive to excel with the IEP goals.
A lot of times it's like us, our accurate. Does not know at all.
Understood. Let me hold off on that point. Let me seek clarification from our superintendent about the direction that we want to go. But I don't want to provide incorrect information and have someone else come behind me and you're all of a sudden held accountable for something that you weren't aware of.
And we would as an LEA take that information and consider it just as we would from any outside evaluator, and make a determination if it was sufficient or not.
So I think we'll address this point in the next few slides here. So just basic eligibility rules. They must be between the ages of 3 and 21. The upper limit is as defined by state code, which is September 1st of the school year. So if they're 22 in March, and they applied in February, they would still be eligible. They have 3 parts to the test, which we'll go over here shortly here. And I have a link to the state eligibility rules here. It goes back to the special ed manual for those people who are not in special ed making the assessments, or for the private schools, so they have a ability to see how the eligibility process works.
I have a question here from an LEA. What if a student was just evaluated by the school district on July 13th of this year and was found not eligible? Then a Carson Smith application was turned in on the 19th. Does the school district have to reassess, or can the district send in the evaluation results and eligibility form with the application?
That would depend if the parents are disputing the outcome. The parents are insistent that their child should be eligible for special education, then they have right to the appeal process, dispute resolution through Child Find. Because at that point, they're still not a Carson Smith student. They're still considered to be a public education student.
And that's messy, because if it were for SLD, we would be giving Woodcock Johnson.
Yeah.
And we can't turn around and get the same assessment within a year.
Yeah. Yes.
So this age 3 to 21, if they finish the 12th grade at 18, and these other years, they have to be in a private school setting, and then stay there 20 years old.
Have they graduated?
Yeah.
Then they're not eligible.
So the 21 only means that they have to.
That's correct.
Yes, if they haven't graduated.
Yes.
Okay, we have a proportion share, sorry, going back to that, but because we're talking about eligibility, and that's child line, is that also part of the proportion share? So we're not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's still Child Find. Yeah.
Even though that even with the eligibility, right?
Yes. So if you call it Child Find requires a district to have a plan to find or assess individuals who have special education needs within their district boundaries.
Right. There's no that change.
No, it's still the same. So the first requirement is they have to meet one of the 13 categories identified by the code. to be eligible. This is the first requirement. And they have to meet all 3 requirements. If they don't meet one of the 3, they are not eligible for special education services nor Carson Smith scholarships. So these are defined by statute. Can I have a link here to the definitions? These are the qualifying disabilities. So they have to have been assessed to have one of these disabilities and prior to the first step in the process. So if they don't have one of these disabilities documented and assessed and determined, they would not be eligible for Carson Smith services. They may have other needs, but these needs wouldn't qualify them for Carson Smith. Any questions here? Okay. A reminder that a diagnosis does not equal a disability. So you can be diagnosed as being somewhere on the autism spectrum, but the next determination would be, does that diagnosis, does that disability impact the learning or functioning of that student? Because a doctor determines someone has a learning disability or a TBI, traumatic brain injury, does not mean that this qualifies them for the program. We have to make an assessment of their abilities to function as a student, as an individual, before we can determine that they have a disability that qualifies them for special education. Any questions? Okay. Second requirement, disability must adversely affect and/or academic and/or functional performance. So the IEP team has to make an assessment on each individual student of how their disability impacts them to do any of these things. Communication, social relationships, emotion regulation, developmental progress, and academic performance and functional performance. So there's a wide variety we could apply here to a disability to become eligible. It's not just one of these. It could be any of these. And it could be also a combination of these things. The third is the student must require special education or related services as a result of a disability. So that's defined as they must need to have specially designed instruction to make progress in their grade level and general curriculum, or need special related services such as speech or OT or PT. They meet all 3 requirements: having a disability, having impact their learning, and requiring special education or related services. Then they meet the qualifications to receive special education and a Carson Smith scholarship. Do you have any questions in this area? Okay. Reminder that the determining factor of why someone is not performing at grade level cannot be lack of appropriate instruction and reading. I missed math here, but in math. And it cannot be lack of English proficiency. Those are not areas that will qualify someone for special education or a Carson scholarship, even in the face of having a documented a disability, unless it impacts their learning. So have we all heard about Section 504? All right, so the student 504 plan does not qualify for a student for Carson Smith. It's not the same as having an IEP. If they have a 504 plan, they can still apply for the Carson Smith program and be evaluated at the LEA level to determine whether or not they meet the qualifications, but it's an additional step. And if they have a 504 plan, they can still, the federal law, be entitled to certain accommodations, but it's not, one of those accommodations is not Carson Smith or IEPs. Yes?
So if a student comes to us and has a 504 or has had a 504 in the past with the school district, where do they submit the application? Is the application where they have a 504, or is the application for the school district in which our private school resides if they don't have an IEP?
Where the school district, where your school is at?
Where the public school is.
Yes, yes. Any other questions on this?
What was that again?
Yes, say that one more time.
So her question was, if someone brings a 504 plan and does not have an IEP, where does the application go to? And the answer is the application goes to the LEA where the school where the private school is located at. In this case, what school district is yours?
In Canyon.
So in this case, it'd go to Canyon's district.
in Davis.
For Carson Smith.
And I don't work for Canyon, so I would assume that your school would have some documentation to bring to Canyon to indicate a need that the student may be a student with disability. Am I right?
Well, most likely we have a diagnosis from a doctor, which doesn't include that they would be eligible for special education. Right now, that's I have 4, a year or 2 before.
Yeah. Okay. Any more questions about 504 versus IEPs or ATMRs? Okay. So back to, we're now on reevaluations again. I know this is a recurring topic here. So when a student is reevaluated, they must consider all the information from all sources. So if they have doctor's assessments, if the private school has observations, test data, you recall private schools are required to provide or issue an annual assessment of the student's academic achievements. And that information should be provided to the IEP team or the ATMR team to determine whether the student is still eligible for services. If it's behavioral issues that are in the IEP or the ATMR, then classroom observations about the behavior, interaction with others, communication should be included in that ATMR reevaluation. It must determine whether they still meet the 3 prongs of having a disability, having a disability impact their learning or functioning, and also have the documentation that they are still in need of specialized individual instruction.
Okay, I have a question here. What do we do when the private school doesn't provide the LEA with any current info?
They should request the info from the school district, from the private school, and before reissuing the evaluation.
But so if they don't have current information?
They're required to have information at least from the past school year. At least once per year, they have to issue an annual assessment. Whether that's in the fall and information is a few months old, or whether it's in the spring and information is a few weeks old. They require to have issued some sort of evaluation every year. Anybody have any questions about reevaluation? I know we kind of talked about this previously in our various discussions. I want to go over our forms here. So a change of information form that's on our website can only be used to change an address, email, phone, information. We can use it to tell us that we're changing private schools or changing the minutes that the student is eligible for, but that requires a new ATMR to be provided or a letter of acceptance if they're changing schools.
Do you want both forms? When we sit down in an ATMR meeting and we're increasing the minutes and there's that little box that says, is this a change? Is that sufficient, or do you want the change of information form as well?
That is sufficient because the ATMR is going to indicate that information. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this form should only be used if you're changing contact information.
Okay.
Otherwise, it requires additional information.
Right. And which every time I send out a check, I send out that top letter so that if there's an address change, they can change that. Required. Verification.
So parent guardian change form, it's used to change if there's a parent information change, whether there's a household change, the divorce, marriage, whatever, or child moving from one household to another. In order to do that, you're required to submit 2 proofs of residency for the new parent. We had a question today that came in about what information qualifies as proof of residency. Anything that proves that you have a Utah residency currently. And this may get a little off topic, but anytime an individual has been residing in the state for more than 60 days or has been employed in the state for more than 60 days, they're required to obtain a Utah driver's license, which means that they would probably be registered to vote also. So right away, if you have people who have been living here at least 60 days, they should have those 2 forms of identification. So even if they haven't bought a house or living with family, they should have those other forms of identification to be able to qualify for the scholarship. This is important because we're not awarding scholarships simply to people who happen to be living in the state. They're required to be Utah State residents to obtain this scholarship. Any questions there?
This is also where someone could add a guardian for the check.
Yes. Well, no, that needs to go on the application. If they're going to add someone like that, it needs to go on the application.
So if they already have their scholarship and they
Then
want
they
to
can
add.
add the parent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Moving on to the fun stuff. We had a legislative audit. I say fun because the audit was ongoing and I had questions probably my third or fourth day here. So they examined the years of 2015, 2016, 2017. They didn't examine 2018 because we were in the middle of that year and it's hard to do an audit while the year's ongoing. Things are changing, information's changing, but it never ends really. So they reviewed all aspects of the program, all the way from the time that we put applications to we cut checks, how we maintain information, how we determined whether an application was late or on time, all sorts of things. It was barely completed a few weeks ago. Here's a link to the audit report. I won't bore you with every line by line of the audit report. But we have some findings we need to address. The first finding is that student eligibility needs to be more precise. So we have an issue where a greater percentage of the Carson population has been deemed to be level 2 than the general public education system. Almost 4 times as much. So that's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem, you know. You have some questions?
No, but it's going to require more funding. Oh, I mean, you're looking at.
Yeah.
Something that's the end.
Some of the schools like self-contained services.
Yes.
Sure, at the higher level.
They would be as populated. Also, parents pushing out.
We'll address that when we talk about changes. So because of that, there's been some changes that have been initiated by the auditor, the recommendations, and the school superintendent has accepted those recommendations, and we're going to work towards implementing those recommendations, which will mean there'll be some changes on our part, both of our parts. So we already talked about the first change is that, and we're going to require additional participants for the ETMR meetings. Instead of a minimum of 4, up to 4, we're going to require 6 individuals that have to fulfill multiple roles in the ETMR process, and we already discussed those. Do we have any concerns, questions about those?
We don't have that many people.
I have something here from a private school. The reason it is higher is the parents of students who would be in a self-contained classroom are more likely to seek out.
That's a plausible possibility, but at the same time, we want to make sure that parents or school or private schools aren't pressuring the LEAs to change their initial assessment. So the auditor and the superintendency feels that if we involve more individuals in the process, they can provide more insight and they can provide more reasonings for the level of service that is recommended. So that's why we're going to have an individual that can interpret the testing results, explains why. We're going to have a special education teacher to explain what kind of classroom instruction they would receive or should receive. A private school, so they can discuss what kind of services they could provide that would address the disability and their needs. And also we're going to have, if there's related services needed, we're going to have a speech or OT or PT person there or behaviorist to address that portion of it also. We feel that if we have all of these participants in the meeting, we will have a more clear determination, and if there's questions, that they can be adequately addressed. Another change is that we're going to have additional documentation submitted along with the ATMR. So we talked about that if there's an IEP, we want the IEP evaluation form and the service form. If there's not an IEP and it's based off an ATMR, we're going to request that we be provided with the assessment results or any other information being used to determine the level of service being requested. And this information will be reviewed on a periodic basis by internal staff, our compliance specialist, and we have 2 individuals who have been school psychologists previously to verify that the level of service being provided or requested on the ATMR is consistent with the data that has been used to make the evaluation. And this will go to the fact that if parents or schools are pressuring a higher level of service for whatever reason, if they feel the kids fall behind, or if it's for the scholarship reasons, that's addressed, and we don't have these issues where we have larger number of students receiving services at a higher rate than normal or normally would be qualified for.
So what do you do if you, a private school, aren't in agreement about the service time?
There would be a consultation, there would be a conference, and go over the information, and ultimately the superintendent can be the arbiter of what is correct. So it'd mirror kind of like a dispute resolution process in a public setting.
Okay, so I've got some questions for now too. So, okay, it says, is the district providing the other specialist, i.e. speech, or the private school? Is the district providing another specialist with speech, or is it the private school?
Depends on whether the private school has speech services or not, or has an individual. If the private school does not have that, then under child fine, the district or public LEA would be required to provide that.
So private school does not have.
Any questions on?
That doesn't make sense.
What doesn't make sense?
That's saying that the private school, if they've gone out and sought a language pathologist, that kiddo at that school wouldn't be eligible for services from districts. So does that mean that every private school then would have to,
The private school
they
can,
would either not want to get a speech pathologist, or they might want to get a speech pathologist? To me, it seems like they probably wouldn't want to get a speech pathologist.
I don't think very many private schools have their own speech pathologist.
We actually, in Granite, have quite a few.
Okay, I say that based on my experience in doing the site visits this year, not every school, not even half the schools that I visited had their own speech pathologist.
And then we have another here from Murray. Murray District, I would disagree that the school district is over-identifying or moving the student to self-contained minutes, as the school district is losing twice as much money when the student gets Carson Smith scholarship.
Okay, that's just based on the auditor's sampling, and they're extrapolating the results of their samples. It's not a definite statement, it's just what they found in their audit. I mean, they could sample, in this case, they can sample 100 files. Those 100 files may not be entirely representative of the entire population, but it's what they found in their audit. And it's not feasible to examine all thousands of files. I think we're at over 4,500 students in the Carson Smith system that applied over since its inception in 2005. That's quite a bit of files to examine to determine the exact level of participation, disability type, and all those things. So it's just a sampling. It's not an absolute indicator.
So does that make the state out of compliance? Does that raise an issue at the state level in the question funding? And
Yes. Yes.
so it has to change.
Yes. Yes. That's why we're adding additional personnel to the ATM review process,
Right.
and requesting that the backup documentation used to determine whether someone is eligible or not be submitted for additional review. I'm not saying that we're going to question every one of them, but we just want to assure that this is not occurring.
That they understand that there are specialized schools that are going to have their whole school population
Yeah.
on that
Yeah.
higher level of funding.
Yeah, and this is not
Right.
School specific, this is program specific of all Carson Smith students, this is what they found. I don't believe, I know they went out, I wasn't part of it because I'm not qualified to interpret eligibility and assessment results, but they took a specialist with the auditor and they visited a few of the public schools and requested to review their files or documentation.
The public school?
Yes. Public eligibility.
Gotcha. And that's how they made it.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I have a question here from Jordan District. Ask if they mean providing the other specialist just for the ATMR meeting because the district would not provide a speech therapist to a for-profit school for services, correct?
They would not be required to provide a speech therapist for a private school outside of private proportionate share.
No, I do not.
They can email me or call me in the morning. I'll take care of them. Do we have any other questions on this change here, the ATMR, and what information we need to submit to the state office?
No. And we have one more question from a private school. So how do we get 6 people at the ATMR meeting if more than half of the private schools don't have specialists?
That would come from the district office or the public LEA.
Is the state going to look at having someone from the state be assigned to each LEA to help with testing?
Not
meetings,
currently.
Paperwork?
Not currently. We don't have the manpower for that currently. We're still trying to find who will be able to review our files so we see the information.
If they are for a for-profit, we just do the initial eligibility and the readout. We don't provide the service, right?
That's correct. Because the state definition for private proportionate share includes nonprofit schools only. Yes, that's correct. So our second finding is that the scholarship award process needs to have more consistency. They found in their file reviews, I think they reviewed 196 files, that 74% of the payments had application turned in after the deadline. So that means that, I've been here 8 months now almost, and Dawn was here before me and someone else before her, that the process, there wasn't a defined protocol of when the application is timely and when it's not timely. Is it when it's received by district or is it when it's received to our office? Having in mind that you're required after the either IEP is received or the ATMR is completed to provide it to our office within 10 days. Now that hasn't always happened. We've had instances where a child's due for a reevaluation and it's 3 or 6 months old. Or they submitted an application and the ATMR is signed in March and we received it, I think, on April 15th, which is almost 45 days after the fact. And then previously, sometimes they had made these applications timely when they weren't timely. So we're going to change this. At the recommendation of the superintendency, an application and the ATMR and/or IEP must be submitted by the application deadline, else the application rolls over to the next quarter.
So no more retroactive paying back to the date of the application.
So, and the key here is that their date of eligibility. So if someone submits an application on August 10th, and they're not determined to be eligible for special education services till August 25th. Well, in August, the deadline for applications is August 15th. That means in this case, they were determined to be eligible after the deadline, and they would receive not the first quarter check, but a second quarter check and ongoing. That's going to cause, it's been a change in the past, but that's how we're going to go forward to satisfy the auditor's recommendations. And additionally, all it's going to do is move forward 1 quarter when they receive their scholarship. It actually extend the time period for when they need to get a reevaluation.
Sure, but I understand too that they've known that we go back to the application date. So I know parents are going to be up in arms about that when it, you have 45 days to get them tested. Yeah, it's going to be ugly. So I just,
Because when does it count if they turn it?
It's when they,
Is it a 45 school days?
45 school days, but the issue here is when they determine to be eligible for special education services. So the deadline of August 15th is in state statute. It's not a rule that I've made or the department here has made, it's state statute. So we cannot issue checks for someone who has not been determined eligible for special education services as of August 15th and every deadline in the following quarters. In the past, we are awarding scholarships to people who were determined to be ineligible. And I think they added the different errors they found. It was almost $500,000 in improper payments that the program had made.
So if they're not in session and they turn in the application, parent does everything that they're supposed to do, and there's not someone at the district who's able to come and do the testing because it's summer.
We're going to try and address that with the districts and and find a common ground. But for now, this is how we are proceeding.
Could there be? I mean, I think that mostly impacts the August date.
Yes.
Yes.
The other 3 quarters, I think we can play with. But if I get an application on August 10th, it's due to you. I mean, it's due by August 15th. But I have no information, and the private school isn't in yet to get information from.
Right.
There's no outside evaluation done on this child. We're going to have to take those full 45 days. I mean, usually we don't take that long, but we need to take that time to do a full evaluation, which then penalizes the parents when they followed everything. So I think the initial one, if we could find some way to deal with that, and the other 3 quarters we can follow to the letter. But
that will require a change in the law. In which
no, it's the change in what you're saying. I mean, the application date is the application date.
yes,
It's the eligibility date that you're saying has to be by that same application date. But if your rule can say, except for the initial application date.
I can take that, but I can tell you that based on the audit results and the scrutiny that we have of the legislator because of those results, that most likely the superintendency isn't going to say we'll make an exception for this.
Can I just make one more statement?
Sure.
I mean, I work with Pingree. They give, they have, 30 new students at the beginning of the school year. I get applications for 30 new students on August, whatever day they give them to me. And I have 4 days to do 30 eligibility determinations. That's not fair to those parents.
I understand.
And it's not fair to me.
I will take the concerns to the superintendency and see what kind of wiggle room we can work out and how we can satisfy it. I think probably
You want somebody to come and whine.
I can assure you that probably the best way to make that change effective, is when it won't be immediate, is to recommend a change in the law. And we can do that. We can work with our legislators to provide feedback and say that if we can do this, it'd be better. For example, this past year we made it officially in the law that if a student becomes ineligible at any time during the year, they will still receive the scholarship throughout the whole entire year to accommodate those parents so they don't have to change schools for financial reasons or whatever, so they can still remain eligible. We're trying to do what's best in the interest of the children here. So we could work with that to make to accommodate that in some way.
They become ineligible. That is a change.
In the meantime, we just need to tell the parents that we're submitting right now the scholarship determination date.
Correct. Correct.
Right. We're going to have to push the eligibility date.
Yeah.
Could that be put on something like that? Be put on the website for the application so the parents can see that?
Yes. Yes, we can.
We need to. And Amy and I don't know, Sally.
Yes.
And I love my private schools, you know that. But one private school, all these eligibilities were due for all these new kids moved in without even they didn't tell me.
and they're not giving me anything, they're not scheduling anything. What do we, I mean, I crash course and got them all in at the end, but what do we do when a private school is not responding?
Well, they don't get the funding.
Yeah.
And they do, but then I get emails from, it's not my fault. So what do we do? Do we just report it to Amy so she can report it to Leah then?
Well, if there's a private school that's the party is holding up the process, we're limited in our power or authority over them.
Okay.
Basically, what I feel our limitations are is telling them, well, your student will not get paid until this is done, and it could be pushed into a following quarter. And so it's your interest of getting, essentially it's the interest of the private school to work with the public school to get this taken care of, to keep the parent happy. Otherwise, the parent can go to another school if they wish, if it's not getting taken care of in a timely manner.
Yeah, well, it was like a whole year of like, usually not, but it was horrible. I got parent calls, maybe I called.
Yeah, I understand. So moving on, also 14% of the applications were incomplete and received the payment also. So we're working if more to make sure that we have all the information. And a lot of these errors we found were prior to Amy and I's time. So not a reflection of what's been happening recently, but we're going to be more consistent in application, know that we're going to hold to deadlines, it's in or it's not in. It's also the responsibility of the public school to get the information into us in a timely fashion. That if you have a 18-hour signed on March 15th, it should be to our office by March 25th at the latest.
The private school for the social.
The private school is supposed to send the ATMR.
Right.
Yes. Some of us are more controlling than others.
Yeah, true.
Currently, the private school has been submitting it, but it's also on the private school to be able to get it in a timely fashion, because if they have it and they're sitting on it and just had an inconvenience or workload issues, and they haven't got it into us and it's late, they're not going to get funding until the following quarter.
And want it by mail?
It can be faxed. It'll be fax or mail are your two options.
ATMRs can be faxed.
Yeah. No. It's insecure, and I've been told to instruct everybody not to do it. Not required.
Right, not required, but as long as I have a fax copy, it comes through legibly. We have issues with that coming, I know.
So another source of problems was the level of service changes being applied retroactively. This is no one's fault in this room, except for someone who wrote the program, that the program was designed to pay back to the beginning of the year. So if in April someone moved from a level 1 to a level 2 based on need or reevaluation, the program paid them a level 2 money for the whole entire year.
Back to the beginning of the year.
And that was 14% of the errors, and I think that was close to $200,000. So we're changing that now. There will no longer be retroactive payments when the level of service changes. That change will be effective in the following payment period. So if the level of service changes before the deadline, that payment will take effective, new payment will take effective in that quarter. If it's after the deadline, it will take effective in the following quarter. And we made changes on our side to make sure that happens. So in the past, if you had students that you gotten an increase because they changed level of services, then no longer will get that until the following quarter. It's effective.
And also, if they change from a 2 to a 1, that won't go back retroactively either and cause like no check to come for the third or fourth quarter if they've been overpaid. But I do have something here from a private school. Is it possible that the school districts are upset that more special education students are leaving, taking away their funding to private schools, causing Neil or whomever to make all these changes that are going to affect students receiving the scholarship, making it more difficult? That is just how it looks.
No, these changes are entirely based on the legislative auditor's recommendations. Well, I would add, because I'm also the individual who is responsible for federal funding for public schools. Because someone leaves the public school in 1 year does not affect the funding, state or federal, for them in that same year. It only affects this funding until into the following year and on, depending on the funding type. For state funds, it takes a few years to make an impact because state funds are averaged over a 5-year period. So that's not really a motive for all these changes. The third problem they found was that the parent verification process is ineffective. So the problem is that checks were signed by someone else. They found 11% of the checks were tried to be signed by the person authorized on the account or on the application, but the signatures did not match. And the signatures, I helped them with this, the signatures were wildly inaccurate. So, and most of them were older signatures, but when we received 1,000 checks, we haven't been in the, per quarter, we haven't been in the practice of verifying the signatures match every time. That's something he found. Also, he found that the check and the VRD contained an improper signature. Meaning the signature was either the wrong person or does not match on both the forms. And 3% of the checks were deposited did not have a signature, nor did the VRD. That's a bigger problem on our part. Why are we allowing funds to be kept if they're not signing for them? And so up to $387,000 for these check issues may have been improper, based upon these figures here.
What were checks going to the private school?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
What does VRD stand for?
Verification of receipt and deposit, so it's what we send with the check. It needs to be signed in addition to the check.
That in the back there?
I have a question for you. I've had this because I deposited a check from Carson at our bank, and they keep telling me that state checks cannot be signed over to the school and then signaturized. They keep telling me it's against the law. They keep taking it because they know to do it. So we have to keep fighting it.
Well, it's in our law, in the state code. So I could refer them to that and say it can be. Yeah.
All right, I'll have to find that.
What probably is that some agencies may put a restriction on how the checks can be endorsed, but I don't believe it's blanket across all state checks.
That's just what they tell me.
I understand. If you have a problem with that, give us a call and we'll try and work it out.
All right.
You're Jessica, correct?
So we've kind of talked about some of these program changes. We've added places for 2 parent signatures. So that way either parent can sign the VRD and the check and still be in compliance. We talked about the ATMRs will now require more people to participate in the meeting and more documentation to be submitted to our department so we can verify the accuracy of the information. Next year, not this year because I don't have enough time to implement this, checks will be issued directly to the schools. So we will do away with next year the VRD process and checks being mailed. We will work on doing EFT deposits directly to the school.
Get rid of that. Slide problem.
Yeah.
And get rid of a huge bulk of work that I do every quarter.
Also, there will be no retroactive payments, either based on application date or based on level of service changes. We are not paying back anymore. So then we'll talk about Seascapes. Seascapes is how we verify the enrollment of the student at the time of the lottery process. The private schools are responsible to verify that the student is still enrolled, that the student's grade is accurate, that the tuition of the parent is accurate also. Now this is important because I know a lot of schools may offer financial assistance with the tuition amount. You must subtract the financial assistance you provide from the tuition award amount. So if your tuition is $20,000 per year and you offer $5,000 of tuition assistance, the tuition entered in the Seascapes must be $15,000. This is important because the tuition paid by the parent cannot be more than the scholarship amount. So roughly $8,200 is the max amount for a level 2 person. And so if it's scholarship required by the parent, payment by the parent required less than that amount, and we didn't know about that, both us and the private school would be a violation of the law here. So we want to remain compliant, make sure we enter the actual amount the parent is paying out of their own pocket. Status. We need to make sure the status is accurate. If a student is not approved, unfunded, or approved, they will not receive a check. So if you have someone that is supposed to be receiving payments and they are either pending, expired, or withdrawn, you need to contact our office so we can investigate why and explain the reasoning why it's accurate or not accurate. Any questions here? Yes.
Just want to verify, when we get the amount of tuition, that includes enrollment fees, therapy, that, do we have that, or is it
Just tuition.
It's tuition and fees.
I don't think that let me look in the law and see the law defines it. I will verify what the law says. Yes.
Yeah, just a question, I guess, that we have on that, but particularly if the therapy service fee is part of the total tuition, that would be sort of like.
Yeah, if it.
It's not sort of like a speech fee, but it's actually for us, for example, an integrated services fee, that's part of their total tuition coverage.
Yes. Yes, that would be correct. But if they're paid tuition and pay for fee services as they go,
Okay.
that would be
And
different.
that we don't do.
Yeah.
We don't vote. If it's a tuition fee.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So this is what Seascape looks like, the verification window. You'll have a base ID number, you'll have a student name, you'll have the birth date, the application status, the grade level, the minutes of service, and the tuition and fees. If any one of these middle four things is wrong, where the errors are pointing, you need to contact us or correct it if you can correct it yourself. And then you must check the private school review. Without that check, the student will not get a check in the lottery. And speaking of the lottery, we're going to try and hold more tightly to our deadlines and to get checks out. So please be cognizant of the email Amy sends to you when she says the lottery window is open.
And we might be reducing that verification window time because the time it is to get the checks out, I need a few days as checks. Every time, and I do have a question here, it says, okay, if I understood correctly, if we give additional funding on top of the scholarship, then we need to put what their tuition responsibility is in Seascapes after our help.
That's right.
That is correct.
That is correct. Also, in Seascapes, you're required to reset your password every 90 days.
Arlene?
What is her phone number? I didn't do it.
But, and, she wants actually you guys to come through me so that it's the verification process of that Sue is the correct person for Our Lady of Lourdes.
Okay, so when I call you.
You call me, and
my
then
password's not working.
and I put you through to
And
Marlene.
then, okay.
And it's just a verification way for her to know it's the correct person, so she doesn't have to do
Random
that.
people.
Right.
Okay, all right.
She wants that held secure and doesn't want
And I
somebody.
can understand.
Yeah, so that's why we do it that way. And I have a question here. Will a student get a retroactive check if they don't get drawn in the current lottery?
No. Currently, if their funding is available, everybody will get money. If there's a lottery process, the law dictates that we cannot back pay for when more funding becomes available or if someone drops out. And the only exception to that is if we have a dictate from the legislator to back pay people who didn't receive it by law. But the lottery process is a lottery process for that reason.
So the answer to your question is
Yes. So private school visits. I'm required to revisit 1/3 of all the schools every year.
I don't have 56.
Yes. I will not be visiting. It's not on because I visit Autism Solutions 1 year that they don't get seen for 3 more years. It's a random selection basis. So you could get seen back to back or you could get seen 2 out of 3 years. So they're usually going to occur between February and May. depending on my availability with my other responsibilities, I kind of tied to my office during legislature time, make why any Carson Smith funding or budget or changes bills are being processed. Then I can, be more free to go out and visit the schools. If you have corrective action plans, they must be completed within 45 days of my visit. Anybody have a question about the visits in general?
When do we find out if we're being visited?
Usually, because I was new this year, we didn't have a lot of time to provide that. But hopefully, February, end of January, February,
Okay.
I'll send an email out. Also, if you do see an email from me about visits, please respond. I had quite a few schools who, I don't know if they went to spam or what happened, but I didn't get responses. So here's some results of the visits. So 2 schools were lacking teacher background checks. That's a big, big issue. Because state law requires that any teacher or individual that has direct access to students unsupervised must go through a criminal background check. Next one is teacher certifications. They have to be certified either as a state-approved teacher with a state certification. They must have a bachelor's degree or 3 years of teaching experience.
If they're working. I mean, if it's a third grader and you have a middle school teacher.
That's fine, but they have to have a certification. So either a state of Utah license.
Every teacher has that.
No, for Carson Smith teachers.
All right.
For Carson Smith teachers. So if you have a teacher that comes from out of state and they choose not to go through the licensing process, you need to have on file at your school a copy of their transcripts or a employment verification. Employment verification is not a resume that they say they taught 3 years. It's a third-party verification that either from an email or a written form from a previous school saying, demonstrating that the teacher has at least 3 years experience in teaching.
But it's a random, so all teachers K through 8 in our case, do have to have those credentials because it's a random selection, so you're not only.
Yeah. I would assume most teachers fulfill this requirement that you have on staff, but make sure you have documentation demonstrating that. Also, emergency training for teachers. Documentation that a teacher has undergone emergency training and that they attest by signature that they have done it. Next, the biggest thing we found is that the assessment results were not disclosed. So you have to disclose to the parents of these children at least once per year of their academic assessment results. And it needs to be done in writing. Either have them sign a form that says, I received the results, have them sign the actual test form, result form, something that documents in writing that they received these results. The next problem we found was that tuition costs were undisclosed. You must disclose in writing in your disclosures for Carson Smith how much tuition costs. Having it on your website does not suffice. It needs to be in their disclosure form they sign that they know what the tuition cost is. The next thing we found was emergency disclosures were not disclosed. Emergency procedures were not disclosed. So we need to disclose to the parents how they will be notified of the emergency. Whether it's a gas leak or a water main break or a building fire, evacuation, how the parents know that there's an emergency at the school. Is it going to be a text message? Is it going to be a phone call, an email? Is there an emergency alert system? They need to know how they will be advised of emergencies. Next part was building disclosure. Building inspection report was not available at the time. So you're required to have an occupational inspection report. If you serve food, you have a food inspection report. And you need to have a fire safety inspection report also. All three of those need to be on file at all times at your school. And also, 5 schools did not have an annual assessment test dates disclosed to the parents at application to the school. So we need to tell the parents, maybe not on July 5th this is going to happen, but we will do this test, name the test, and when it will be tested. It is in the fall, what month it is, so the parents have the ability to know what's going to happen to their students. And that's in our rule here, our administrative rule, that it has to be done. The last things we talked about, the IEP or ATMR must be on file. I found 2 files out of, I examined close to 45 files, but not too bad, 2 files that didn't have the ATMR or IEP on file. That's important because the school needs to know what services the child should be receiving according to their disability type and how much. So we need to have all those things in there. Do we have any questions about these things? What constitutes it to fulfill these requirements? What should be done in the future? Anything like that?
There's a question here from one of the private schools. To clarify, we are not visited every 3 years. We can be visited every year. And that's yes.
Yes.
It's random.
Yes.
Yes.
This is a link to the mid-year review form. The mid-year review form is the exact identical form that I use to do my evaluations at the site visits. The exception is site visits form. I sample files and verify that the specific files have the information required. The mid-year review form just says I attest that I have this information available. Available means available when I come to see it. Not that someone has it somewhere and you can email it. Any questions? I know we're over time, but I'll take questions. Go ahead.
Just a simple question.
Sure.
Are either you or Leah going to go over this presentation to the DADs and the 12 directors of special ed? It seems like there were some fairly significant changes or interpretations of the changes. Because I've always known about proportionate share. We've always known about that.
Yeah, I won't say that we will address them specifically, but we've had questions from them, either to myself or Leah, and so we know their concerns.
Yeah. It just seems like because they need, I don't know how frequently.
You're not answering the question. They need to know what.
The question was if we were going to address these specific issues with the larger school districts around here, and the answer is that they have contacted us, Leah and I, with their concerns, and they will know what's expected of them.
And what do you do with private schools? I think I have one private school here. So I have a lot that are not here.
So we're providing this online. There's up to 30 people who elected to participate online. They're at their own risk. If they didn't come here, they've been emailed to PowerPoint. They're at liberty to contact me or Amy with questions, but I would expect them to provide them information. If they don't contact me, it's their responsibility to have understanding of it. Yes?
When you go to do these audits, you're aware that you fix new loans, right?
Yes.
And so when Amy tells me I have a reeval on somebody, if I go over to that private school to do it, they put it in 3 other places that I could have absolutely nothing.
So when I talked about communication, we'll work on providing you accurate information where that student is enrolled at the time. So if we say you have a reevaluation, we'll tell you that you're attending this school currently. Will that help?
Yeah, I don't know how would I notify her.
Well, it's difficult because I'm doing a reeval and I don't know where the cognitive test is. That means I'm doing everything wrong. And sometimes I try to find what they did before, but sometimes that's difficult to find that information.
If you have a question of that nature, contact us and we'll help you out. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you for coming. Feel to contact Amy or I with any question, concerns you have.
I have emailed the PowerPoint out to you, so you should be able to download it and send it to anyone else who needs to look at it. If you have any questions, just send them to me and I'll get them answered. And appreciate everything you guys do. And Carmen, I have a check that is endorsed so that you guys can take it. One of the parents.
I'm Jared.
I am. You're right in the front office, right? Sometimes. So you guys take it over? Okay. Welcome.